Namaskar. Welcome to Conversations with Rakesh. Today's question. Rakesh, I have been repeatedly told in my office to improve my voice modulation. I have a naturally soft voice and feel that I am not heard properly when I speak. How do I improve my voice modulation? Is it even possible? Um, unless there is a physical disability or an impairment or a medical condition, uh, all of us have been given this amazing voice box, the larynx, and we don't realize its power. It's an amazing instrument God has given us, which has muscles and the power to speak and bring out those sounds that we bring out. And there is enough research to prove that this can be programmed and trained and it can produce amazing results. So if you feel that you have a naturally soft voice, doesn't mean that it will not change. And I'll give you lots of examples. The simplest examples around us are that when we travel from a country A to country B, that culture does bring out a very different voice in us. It has a more slang in it. I mean, this classic example when I used to work in the technology sector in the corporate world was that when we people in Bangalore sit in a plane which is headed to America, our entire speech becomes very American. Hey man, how are you? Happens. And if we go to Mumbai, there is a Mumbaiya style, hey, khane ka, pine ka. So there is a reflection of our surroundings to our voices, and there are changes that happen. And over age, when we touch puberty, the voice becomes very terrible. Many of us are very embarrassed because of it. So it takes time to stabilize. And because of that, many of us kind of go into a comfort zone, which becomes a feeling that this is how I naturally speak. That is not true. It is possible to program and change your voice with training, with practice. That is my message number one. Singers do it, tenors do it, theater people do it, orators do it. I don't see any reason why you should not be able to do it. There is also a video somewhere on YouTube of a researcher who actually put a camera in a tenor's throat and recorded it. And when the tenors are these people who sing these operas with the kind of power that nobody can do it. Only they are trained to do it, and they're trained from childhood. Are they born like this? I don't know. That debate on talent, is it God gift or can be acquired, is still a debate. But I am of the view, my personal view, that it can be learnt and acquired, provided there is no impairment or disability or medical condition. So this video on YouTube looks at the throat and the voice box and the larynx of the tenor when he's singing this difficult soprano or opera, whatever you call it. And you can see how they control the space in that area to allow only a certain amount of air. The muscles contract and a certain voice comes out. When he suddenly changes the voice, the entire aperture and openings change, and they control it. And they use breathing techniques, massive amount of willpower, massive amount of training to these muscles and brain to coordinate all of it. The brain is actually the machine that makes it all happen, and then they control these muscles with some reflexes and voluntary involuntary actions. So my request to all of you is that it is possible to have voice modulation. It just requires training and practice. A second example, there's a famous movie, King's Speech. King's Speech has this story of the king who has a stammering problem, and he goes to this professor who puts marbles in his mouth and makes him speak something. And we know that the training was useless, and then there is another person who makes a different training program and the king improves. That's a stammering problem, but his voice modulation was impacted because of that. So these things are possible with little bit of intervention to change. And in the olden days, theater people, they were given voice training first because there were no mics in the olden days. So the performer had to throw their voice so that people in that room, the king's court or the audience in the theater, could hear. And they're not born like that. They are trained and practiced. So I believe that your voice modulation can change. There are 4 or 5 parameters. One is called pitch, the second is frequency, the third is volume, and the fourth is tonality. So there is a definite possibility that these 4 parameters can be changed with practice. And the simplest is, take a poem that all of you can read, Hindi, English, Tamil, Kannada, any poetry that you are fond of, and recite it. Record yourself and change the tonality a little bit, change the volume a little bit. You need not worry about your frequency, pitch, because they are slightly more technical and they require a little bit more practice, but volume you can increase. Tone can be changed. You know, the way you say a word, you can hint an emotion in that. You can express happiness in your tonality. So all these things can be there. And we express anger to our children. That is voice modulation. Kya kar rahe ho? Where were you? Voice modulation. So we have the capacity to do that. And poetry recitation is by far the simplest. If not, pick up any movie dialogue and recite it yourself. You can do it in the safe environment of your home, a mirror, but record yourself. It's very critical for you to listen to your own voice and fine tune it. And the next time when you make a presentation, just change 3 things. Slow down, first of all. Second is change the volume a little bit. And third is change the tonality. Convey happiness, excitement, a little bit of curiosity, maybe sadness. And that is voice modulation. You don't have to become a baritone Amitabh Bachchan kind of a speaker. There are limitations. I mean, he had a naturally gifted God gift voice and he worked on it. I don't think I have that kind of voice, but I have my own originality. So I work on that and use that. Many of us have a nasal twang. Fine. I mean, that's how it is. But in that, you can minimize the nasal twang and fine tune it to polish it for your audiences. Some of us are highly influenced by our society, so we speak very softly. By nature, we could be like that. The most famous example of a very soft-spoken leader is George Washington. In fact, there is a documentary when he was given he had to take the vow to become the president of United States in 1776. People could barely hear him. But then there was another orator, John Adams, who became the next president, and he was like an orator par excellence and his voice was booming. So it doesn't mean that if you have a soft voice, something is wrong. George Washington was a general fighter and his presence itself was a communication, but he was very soft spoken. So please do not think that because you're soft spoken, you are at a disadvantage. But the feedback has to be taken seriously. So step number 1, practice. Take a poetry or a poem or any dialogue or even your own presentation, record yourself and listen to yourself. Step number 2, modify your tone, volume slightly, and then apply the pitch and frequency techniques to shrill it down the entire thing. Storytelling is a third request. That storytelling helps you become better voice modulators. And the fourth is take feedback from people. Take one step at a time. Next meeting, please request your colleagues to give you a feedback that, hey, was I audible today? Was it better than last time? Now take the next notch and vary that in the 4 parameters. I think you'll be a better speaker than you were yesterday. So on that note, don't even tell yourself that you are naturally a soft speaker. You are kind of putting yourself down. I think we have this amazing voice box and it can be programmed, trained, and you can change your voice based on these techniques of breathing, speaking, slowing down, changing the volume and tone, and many more techniques that can help you speak better so that your audiences respond better. So on that note, practice, stay safe.